Recently, I joined a grief group. After writing my introduction to the group, I thought I should really share that with my TikTok family, so here it is. Before I tell you about my last 5 years, I would first like to add that I have had many years of lingering grief from my mother's suicide, that I wasn't in therapy as a teen, and have never successfully dealt with as an adult. The past 5 years of my life, and my children's lives, has been an absolute nightmare. March 2019, I lost my preteen niece in a house fire. Not 3 months later, I learned I was married to a monster, who is locked away forever now, thank the Lord. Life was hard. Very hard. Adjusting as a newly single mother in such a traumatic period was hard. In May 2020, I received a phone call saying my niece couldn't wake my aunt, my mother's 63-year-old sister. I live right around the corner from her and arrived before anyone. She was gone. I knew she was gone, but I began CPR and continued for about 8 minutes until first responders arrived. We said goodbye to her only a few hours later and removed life support. It was so hard, but things seemed to calm down a bit. 2023, we had trial for my ex. Huge victory, but at the same time it brought up so many emotions for everyone involved. New Year's 2024, my adult daughter called. We had an emotionally charged conversation where she stated she just wanted to have a good year. I told her, like most mothers would, "Honey, this is going to be your best year ever." Hours later, we would learn that her best friend suddenly passed away at 21 years of age. How could I help her when I was so full of grief myself? We pushed through. Somehow, we pushed through. Fast forward to March of this year. March 8th, I was texting my cousin as her baby sister, who is one of my closest friends in this world, had went into heart failure at 42. She let me know they were working on her, but then finally let me know she had passed. I flew to the hospital and made in time to see them bring her out to take her to the funeral home. Once again, a piece of heart had left. So young and leaving behind so many who loved her. I struggled. I struggled bad. About a week later, 15-year-old son developed an ear infection. After being seen by his doctor, he began a course of antibiotics. 4 days later, he expressed to me that he had the worst headache he's ever experienced. Mind you, he has a tension posterior fossa arachnoid cyst in his brain, so he's had his share of headaches. As it was later in the day and we couldn't get in to his doctor, I drove him straight to the ER. The doctor said his ear infection was improving. I expressed my concerns given his previous neurological history. The doctor preformed a neuro exam and made him do the whole head turn thing. We were given some ear drops to accompany the antibiotics we were already on and sent on our way. 3 days later, as I lay sleeping in my bed, I hear "Mama," the most painful, drawn-out mama you could imagine. I jump up to find my boy walking, but yet convulsing at the same time fighting his, was to my bed. I call 911. We are sent right back to the same hospital. After a CT and MRI, I learn my baby, my youngest child, has meningitis, a brain abscess, a blood clot on his brain, and is gravely ill. We are transferred to the Children's Hospital an hour and a half away. He is sent immediately into surgery to have his brain flushed and was placed in an extreme antibiotic regimen. A second emergency surgery was done the next day, and we were also informed there was a possibility my son may not pull through. March 29th, after being in the PICU for only 4 days, with my son not even knowing if he would pull through. I get a call that evening. It was coming from my brother's phone, so I assumed he was probably just calling to check in on his nephew, as he had made sure to stay informed up to this point. I answer, and my heart is ripped out of my chest as I heard my precious sister-in-law screaming and crying. Something had happened to my brother. At 44 and completely healthy, definitely the healthiest of my siblings for sure. My brother had an aortic dissection and was being taken into surgery. I can't explain the feelings I felt when she also informed me that doctors had only given him 50-50 odds of making it. I was so conflicted as I wanted to race off and be there with her and my nieces. I was also at a hospital hours away with no vehicle. I had rode the ambulance in with my boy, and a son who was still in critical condition. I awaited eagerly for each update. Hour 4. My sister-in-law said the nurse used the words, "It's looking good." I felt hope for the first time since the initial call. Around hour 5, as they tried closing him up from a seemingly successful surgery, he began oozing. I still hear that word in my head. They couldn't close him up after surgery and said that if he made it through the night, they would attempt another surgery the next morning. March 30th, 2004. And it was confirmed to me that my brother, my literal rock, had not made it. When I tell you I felt grief like I never had before, and boy, I could write a book on my 40 years of loss. Physically, I felt my body was failing me. A burning sensation like I'd never felt before filled the inside of my body. And I have severe acid reflux, and it was not that. It was literal heat. My brother. My sweet, sweet brother. How would I get through this? I remember walking outside of Children's and just losing it. I remember loudly expressing to my sibling who had just lost, "If you're going to leave us, you have to make sure my son lives." I then slowly walked back into the hospital where my son lay in critical condition. April Fool's Day, while preparing to go say goodbye to my brother, I was informed that one of my best friends, a woman I had spoken to every single day for hours, had passed. She had been one of the main people who had pushed me through the past 5 years. Damn it, Sally, why? I left the hospital for the very first time since arriving and drove to the country. Passing horse farms and cow pastures, we arrive at the quaint and beautiful private cemetery owned by the amazing family of his wife. The absolute overflowing of love and obvious expression of how amazing of a person my big brother was shown through the hundreds of people who gathered to say goodbye to him in this pasture. After a couple-hour drive, I arrived back at Children's Hospital and had to shut it all off as my last-born still lay in critical condition in the PICU. I couldn't let him feel my grief. I was so afraid that even though he was mostly unconscious, he would feel something was wrong, or he would find out his uncle had passed, and it would set him back in his own healing. I finally told the day before we left Children's 3 weeks after we had arrived. My boy was sent home with a PICC line where he received 5 more weeks of IV antibiotics, an additional surgery. We have made huge strides. He still has brain inflammation, the blood clot, and is currently fighting off another ear infection.